I'm Marilyn, 57 years old, and after 32 years of what I thought was a solid marriage, I discovered my husband Harold was cheating with his secretary. The text messages I found were explicit enough to make even a nurse like me blush. But it wasn't the affair that made paramedics show up that day. It was what happened after I swapped the oil in his precious Mustang with industrial strength glue. Let me tell you how it all went down. Before I continue, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Go ahead and hit that like and subscribe button while I tell you how my revenge plan literally stuck my husband to his mistress. My story begins at Georgetown University in 1987. Harold was the handsome engineering student with a passion for classic cars, and I was the nursing student who thought he hung the moon. We had one of those whirlwind romances that everyone envies. 6 months of dating, and he proposed on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial with a diamond that must have cost him a year's worth of his part-time mechanic salary. Our wedding was everything I dreamed about since I was a little girl growing up in Richmond. My father, a retired Army colonel, walked me down the aisle in my mother's restored wedding dress. Harold couldn't stop the tears when he saw me. That's the Harold I fell in love with, sensitive, kind, and completely devoted to me. The early years of our marriage were the happiest of my life. We moved to suburban Atlanta when Harold got a job offer at an automotive engineering firm. I found work at Memorial Hospital and quickly moved up to head nurse in the surgical ward. We saved every penny and bought a beautiful colonial-style house with a wraparound porch on Magnolia Drive. I planted a garden in the backyard, and Harold built a garage where he could tinker with his growing collection of classic cars. When our son James was born in 1990, followed by our daughter Emma, 2 years later, our family felt complete. Harold was an attentive father who never missed a baseball game or dance recital. Every Sunday, he made his famous blueberry pancakes, and we'd eat breakfast on the porch, planning our dreams for the future. As the children grew, Harold's career flourished. He started his own automotive business specializing in classic car restoration, and it took off faster than either of us expected. I was so proud of him watching as he built something from nothing through hard work and determination. But looking back, I can see the warning signs that started about 5 years ago, after the kids had left for college. Harold began working later and later. At first, I didn't think much of it. His business was growing, and he had clients all over the Southeast. But then came the other changes. He started wearing a cologne I hadn't picked out for him. His wardrobe suddenly included shirts and ties I'd never seen before. His phone, once casually left on countertops or coffee tables, was now password protected and never out of his sight. The business trips became more frequent, sometimes announced with barely 24 hours' notice. Our intimacy, both emotional and physical, began to wane. Conversations that once lasted hours over glasses of wine became brief exchanges about household logistics. He forgot our 30th anniversary completely, something the old Harold would never have done. I convinced myself it was just a midlife crisis, or maybe the stress of running his own business. Maybe he was worried about retirement planning. I made excuses for him, because that's what you do when you've loved someone for 3 decades. You give them the benefit of the doubt. All the while, Harold's obsession with his classic cars, especially his 1967 Mustang, grew stronger. He'd spend entire weekends in the garage polishing and tuning that car like it was his firstborn. I used to bring him iced tea and watch him work, but gradually he made it clear my presence wasn't welcome in his sanctuary. Then came Jessica. Harold hired her as his secretary about 2 years ago. 28 years old, business degree efficient, and eager to learn the classic car industry, or so he said. The first time I met her at the company Christmas party, something felt off. The way she looked at him wasn't how an employee looks at their boss. And the way he introduced us was stiff formal, like I was a client rather than his wife. I noticed how he'd mention her name in conversation. Jessica organized the new filing system. Jessica suggested a new marketing approach. Jessica stayed late to help with the inventory. Jessica, Jessica, Jessica. Our empty nest should have brought us closer. Instead, it created a void that grew wider by the day. I tried everything: romantic dinners, weekend getaways, even bought lingerie that made me feel ridiculous at my age. Nothing bridged the gap that was forming between us. I kept telling myself that marriages have phases, that we'd find our way back to each other, that the man who cried when I walked down the aisle was still in there somewhere. But deep down, a voice was whispering that something was very wrong. I just wasn't ready to hear it yet. The day I found out about the affair started like any other Tuesday. Harold left early for work, kissing my cheek absently on his way out the door. I had the day off from the hospital and planned to finally organize our home office. I was sorting through a stack of papers when Harold's phone buzzed on his desk. He'd forgotten it, which was unusual given how attached he'd become to that device. The message notification caught my eye. Jessica with a red heart emoji next to her name. I had never snooped through my husband's phone before. 32 years of marriage, and I had always respected his privacy. But something compelled me to pick it up that morning. Call it intuition or just the culmination of months of suspicion. The phone was locked, but after 3 decades together, I knew Harold. I tried his birthday. Nothing. Our anniversary. Nothing. Then I tried James's birthday. The screen unlocked, and I felt a strange combination of victory and dread. The message from Jessica read, "Can't wait to feel you inside me again tonight. Last night was amazing." My hands started shaking so badly, I nearly dropped the phone. I felt like someone had punched me in the stomach. The room seemed to spin, and I had to sit down before my knees gave out. I scrolled up through their conversation history, each message more explicit than the last. References to hotel rooms, to positions, to things they'd done together. Things Harold and I hadn't done in years, if ever. There were selfies of her in lingerie, of him in hotel bathrooms. They had a language of inside jokes and pet names. The physical symptoms of betrayal are something no one prepares you for. The tightness in your chest that makes it hard to breathe. The nausea that rises in waves. The cold sweat and trembling hands. As a nurse, I recognized I was in shock, but that clinical knowledge did nothing to ease the pain. I don't know how long I sat there scrolling through month after month of their conversations. It wasn't just sex. They talked about their future together, about places they wanted to travel. There was an emotional intimacy that hurt almost more than the physical betrayal. When I could finally move again, I went to our bedroom and started searching. In the pocket of the suit jacket he'd worn to a business dinner the week before, I found a hotel receipt. The Ritz-Carlton, champagne and strawberries charged to the room. I called the hospital and told them I was sick. Then I waited. For 6 excruciating hours, I sat in our living room, the evidence spread out around me, and waited for my husband to come home. Harold walked through the door at 6:30 whistling. The sound died on his lips when he saw me sitting there, his phone and the hotel receipts on the coffee table between us. "Marilyn," he said, and just the way he said my name told me everything. No denials, no confusion. He knew exactly what I'd found. 32 years, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. 32 years, Harold. What followed was pathetic, truly pathetic. He didn't deny it. Instead, he tried to minimize it. It was just physical. It didn't mean anything. He'd been feeling unappreciated, undesired. He was going through something. He'd been planning to end it. "You're overreacting," he said at one point, and something in me snapped. "Overreacting? I just discovered my husband has been sleeping with a woman half my age, spending our retirement savings on hotel rooms and gifts for her, and I'm overreacting." He promised to end it with Jessica, swore it was just a mistake, a stupid midlife crisis, begged for another chance. I was too numb to respond. I told him to sleep in the guest room. I needed time to think. That night was the first of many sleepless ones. I stared at the ceiling, replaying our entire marriage in my head. Were there signs earlier that I'd missed? Had he cheated before? Was anything real? The next day, I called my best friend Donna. We'd been friends since nursing school, and she'd stood as my maid of honor at my wedding. Her response when I told her shocked me even more. "Oh, honey, I was afraid of this, she said. The way he was flirting with Jessica at your Christmas party last year, I wanted to say something, but I wasn't sure. The confirmation that others had seen what I hadn't was another blow. I'd been blind willfully, perhaps. Over the next 2 weeks, Harold performed the dance of the remorseful husband. Flowers delivered to the house, tearful apologies, promises of couples therapy, all while I discovered later still seeing Jessica. I didn't trust his promises, so I did something I never thought I'd do. I followed him, took a personal day from work, and waited in my car outside his office. Sure enough, at lunch, Harold and Jessica emerged together. They didn't go to a restaurant. They drove directly to a small apartment complex 15 minutes away. I watched them walk in together, his hand on the small of her back, in that intimate way that used to be reserved for me. They were inside for exactly 53 minutes. I know because I timed it sitting in my car, alternating between tears and a rage so intense it frightened me. When I got home, I went through our credit card statements and found charges for jewelry at stores I'd never received gifts from. I found a statement for a rental property. He'd been paying for an apartment, their little love nest, I presumed. That night when Harold came home, I asked him point blank if he was still seeing Jessica. He looked me in the eye, this man I'd built a life with, and lied without hesitation. I told you it's over, Marilyn. You need to let this go if we're going to move forward. The stress took a physical toll. I lost 15 pounds in 3 weeks. Couldn't sleep more than 2 hours at a stretch. My colleagues at the hospital noticed. My patients noticed. Nurse Marilyn, you don't look well, an elderly man told me as I was checking his vitals. When James and Emma came home for their father's birthday dinner, they both pulled me aside separately to ask if everything was all right. I couldn't bring myself to tell our children that their father was a cheater. Not yet. So I blamed work stress and watched Harold play the role of devoted father and husband. As I observed him laughing with our children, passing around the photo albums, telling the same old family story, something hardened inside me. This man had stolen 32 years of my life. He was still stealing my present with his lies. I was not going to let him steal my future too. Simple forgiveness was not an option, not anymore. The weeks after discovering Harold's betrayal were the darkest of my life. There were moments I didn't recognize myself, moments where thoughts crossed my mind that frightened me. I fantasized about public humiliation, about telling everyone we knew, about slashing his tires or burning his clothes on the front lawn like in some bad movie. I consulted with a divorce lawyer, a sharp woman named Catherine, who specialized in high-asset divorces with a cheating spouse. What I learned during that consultation added fuel to my anger. Based on some financial documents I'd brought in, Catherine suspected Harold had been hiding assets. This pattern of account transfers suggests he's been preparing for a possible separation, she told me. Has he mentioned divorce? He hadn't, which meant Harold was planning an exit strategy while pretending to work on our marriage. The deception went beyond the affair. He was setting himself up to leave me with as little as possible after 3 decades together. I was sitting with this knowledge, this rage, this hurt, when inspiration struck. It was a Saturday afternoon. Harold was in the garage working on his precious Mustang, the car he loved more than anything, more than me certainly. I brought him a beer, something I hadn't done in months. He seemed surprised but pleased by the gesture. As I watched him work, a plan began to form. You don't be married to a mechanic for 30+ years without picking up a thing or two about cars. I knew that the oil was the lifeblood of an engine. I knew that without proper lubrication, moving parts would seize up, destroy themselves from friction and heat. What would happen if someone put the wrong fluid in an engine? I asked casually. Harold, always eager to demonstrate his expertise, launched into a detailed explanation of the various catastrophic failures that could occur. Worst case scenario, the engine seizes completely. Total loss. Why do you ask? Just curious, you know how my mind wanders. That night, I researched industrial strength adhesives, the kind that would flow like oil when first applied, but would set into an immovable bond when heated. the kind used in construction and manufacturing, the kind that would flow through an oil system before setting permanently. I ordered a specific type of two-part epoxy adhesive used in automotive manufacturing. The irony wasn't lost on me. I used Harold's own credit card to make the purchase. My friend Donna thought I was crazy when I told her my plan. "Marilyn, this is destruction of property. He could press charges." "Only if he can prove it was me," I said, "and only if he wants to explain why his mistress was with him when it happened." Together, we refined the plan. Timing would be essential. I needed to make the swap when the car had been sitting long enough for the engine to be completely cool. The adhesive needed enough time to circulate before setting. I had moments of doubt, moments of guilt. Was I really going to do this? Was I really capable of such calculated revenge? Then I found receipts for a weekend getaway Harold had planned, a romantic cabin in the Smoky Mountains. The dates coincided with our anniversary. He was planning to take Jessica away in his cherished Mustang to celebrate the day he had vowed to be faithful only to me. My decision was made. I studied the Mustang's engine layout when Harold wasn't around, learned exactly where the oil cap was, how to check the dipstick, the location of the oil pan and drain plug. I practiced the motions of checking the oil level, so if anyone saw me near the car, it would look routine. The adhesive arrived in unmarked packaging, 2 innocuous bottles that, when mixed in equal parts, would create an industrial strength bond that could hold up to 5 tons of weight once cured by heat. I tested a small amount in our garden shed, mixing it in a disposable container. It had the same viscosity and amber color as motor oil. Perfect. I calculated how long it would take for the adhesive to set once the engine reached operating temperature. According to the technical specifications, complete bonding would occur within 15 to 20 minutes of reaching 150 degrees Fahrenheit. An engine typically operates at 190 to 220 degrees. The timing would be perfect for a catastrophic failure to occur right around the time Harold would be picking up Jessica. Most importantly, I made sure my plan wouldn't cause an accident that might harm someone. The adhesive would allow the engine to start and run briefly before seizing. It wasn't about hurting anyone physically. This was about hurting Harold where he'd feel it most. His pride, his precious car, his secret life. I felt a strange calm as all the pieces came together. For the first time since discovering the affair, I slept through the night. The day I executed my plan was a Wednesday in June. Harold had a client meeting that afternoon, which I now knew was code for a rendezvous with Jessica. I'd never called in sick to work without actually being ill, but there's a first time for everything. I told the charge nurse I had a migraine, which wasn't entirely a lie. A 32-year headache named Harold was about to be dealt with. I waited until Harold kissed me goodbye, watching through the living room window as his car disappeared down Magnolia Drive. My hands were shaking so badly I had to sit down for several minutes before I could proceed. At 9:30, I put on an old pair of gardening gloves and went to the garage. Harold's precious 1967 Mustang sat gleaming under the lights, candy apple red with black racing stripes. He'd recently detailed it, and I could see my reflection in the immaculate finish. I popped the hood and located the oil cap. Just as I was about to remove it, I heard a noise outside and froze. Mrs. Patterson from next door was walking her Yorkie. I ducked down behind the car until they passed. My heart was pounding so hard, I was sure it could be heard from the street. Once I was certain the coast was clear, I proceeded. I removed the oil cap and set it aside. Then I positioned an oil drain pan underneath the car and located the drain plug. With a wrench from Harold's meticulously organized tool chest, I loosened the plug and watched as the clean oil drained into the pan. While the oil drained completely, I prepared the adhesive. Equal parts from bottle A and bottle B mixed in a disposable container until it reached the same amber color as the motor oil. The consistency was perfect, slightly more viscous than oil, but not enough that it wouldn't flow through the system. Once the original oil had drained completely, I replaced the drain plug, tightening it exactly as I'd seen Harold do countless times. Then, using a funnel, I carefully poured the adhesive mixture through the oil, fill hole, matching the exact amount I drained. 5 quarts of what looked like ordinary motor oil, but was actually industrial strength glue. I replaced the oil cap, wiped down every surface I touched, and closed the hood gently. The entire process had taken less than 30 minutes. I disposed of the real oil at a recycling center across town along with all the materials I'd used. Nothing remained in our house or garage that could connect me to what I'd done. Back home, I showered and changed, washing away any physical evidence. The adrenaline crash left me shaky and exhausted. I lay down on our bed and stared at the ceiling, rehearsing my reaction for when the inevitable call would come. Harold came home around 6 earlier than usual. He mentioned casually over dinner that he had to take a client out the next day to show them some restoration work on a similar model to one they were considering. "I'll be taking the Mustang," he said, not meeting my eyes. "The client is very interested in that era of American muscle cars." "That sounds nice," I replied, serving him the pot roast I'd made, his favorite meal, a condemned man's last supper, though he didn't know it. "Anyone I know?" "No new client, from out of town." Another lie to add to the collection. I smiled and asked him about his day playing the role of the oblivious wife one final time. That night I barely slept. Doubt crept in. Was I really going through with this? Was I becoming someone I wouldn't recognize? But then I remembered the text messages, the apartment he'd rented for their assignations, the plans for our anniversary. By morning, my resolve had hardened once again. I kissed Harold goodbye as he left for work, watching as he backed his sedan out of the driveway. In a few hours, he would be switching to the Mustang to pick up Jessica. In a few hours, my revenge would be set in motion. At exactly 1:15 p.m., Harold called. I let it ring twice before answering, keeping my voice casual. "The car broke down," he said, panic evident in his voice. "Something's wrong with the engine. It started making these strange noises, and then everything just seized up." "Where are you?" I asked, infusing my voice with just the right amount of concern. He gave an address I recognized immediately. It was less than a block from Jessica's apartment complex, exactly where I calculated the adhesive would set given the distance and typical engine temperature. "I'll come get you," I said. "Stay with the car. Someone might try to steal it." As I drove to the location, a strange sense of calm settled over me. The months of pain, rage, and humiliation were about to be balanced by a moment of justice. Not legal justice, perhaps, but a reckoning nonetheless. When I arrived at the scene of Harold's automotive disaster, the situation was even better than I could have imagined. The candy apple red Mustang was pulled awkwardly to the side of the road, hazard lights blinking pathetically. Harold was pacing beside it, phone pressed to his ear, likely calling his mechanic friend, and standing a few feet away, looking annoyed and uncomfortable in 4-inch heels, completely impractical for a business meeting, was Jessica. I pulled up behind the Mustang and got out slowly, taking my time. Harold ended his call when he saw me, his expression cycling rapidly through surprise, guilt, and then an attempt at casualness that failed miserably. "Marilyn," he said, "you didn't need to come yourself. I could have called roadside assistance." "And missed the chance to finally meet your client," I smiled at Jessica, who had the decency to look embarrassed. "Though we've actually met before, haven't we, Jessica? At the Christmas party and the company picnic. And I believe I saw you coming out of the Ritz-Carlton last month when I was meeting a friend for lunch." Harold stepped between us. "Marilyn, this isn't the time or place." "Really? I think it's exactly the time and place. Perfect timing, actually." I turned to Jessica. "Did you know he's still living with me, that he made me breakfast this morning before kissing me goodbye, that he's been promising to work on our marriage while planning trips with you?" Jessica's perfectly made-up face crumpled slightly. "He told me you were separated, that you were just living in the same house until the divorce was finalized." "There is no divorce, Jessica. Not yet, anyway. There's just a man who wants everything. His business, his family's respect, his wife at home, and his girlfriend on the side." Harold's face had turned the same shade as his car. Stop it, Marilyn. This is between us. No, Harold. You made it between the three of us the moment you started sleeping with her. A tow truck pulled up, then saving Harold from having to respond. His mechanic friend Tony got out, nodding awkwardly at me, before turning his attention to the car. I stepped back and watched as the two men pored over the engine. I heard snatches of their conversation, strange noises, complete seizure. Never seen anything like it. Tony took samples of the fluid from the oil pan, rubbing it between his fingers with a puzzled expression. This isn't oil, I heard him say. It's some kind of adhesive. Harold's head snapped up. He looked at the substance on Tony's fingers, then at me. I saw the moment realization dawned. You, he said, his voice low and dangerous. You did this. I just smiled, the kind of smile that said I'd do it again in a heartbeat. Harold's face contorted with rage. He started toward me, but Tony caught his arm. Don't do something stupid, man. Not in public. But Harold was beyond reasoning. He shook off Tony's hand and pointed at me. Do you have any idea what you've done? That engine is custom built. It's irreplaceable. Kind of like 32 years of marriage, I replied calmly. Harold turned to Jessica, grabbing her arm. We're leaving. Now. I'll deal with this later. He tried to storm off, pulling Jessica with him, but something strange happened. As they tried to separate from the car, Jessica let out a yelp of pain. I'm stuck, she cried. My bracelet is caught on something. Harold reached to help her, then let out his own cry of surprise. What the hell? In their agitation, they'd both been leaning against the car. The adhesive had begun to seep through various parts of the engine, and some had apparently made its way to the exterior. Harold's expensive watch and the sleeve of his suit jacket were adhered to the car's surface. Jessica's bracelet and the silk sleeve of her blouse were similarly bonded. Their struggles only made it worse. The more they pulled, the more firmly they seemed to be stuck. It was like watching two flies on flypaper. Harold's attempts to pull away caused his watch to tighten around his wrist, cutting off circulation. Jessica's bracelet was digging into her skin as she tugged. By now, a small crowd had gathered. Someone must have called emergency services, because within minutes a paramedic unit arrived, lights flashing. The paramedics assessed the situation with professional puzzlement. They're stuck to the car, one asked incredulously. Industrial strength adhesive, I explained helpfully. It bonds permanently when heated. The engine heat must have activated it. The lead paramedic, a woman about my age, gave me a long look before turning her attention to the stuck couple. We're going to need to use a solvent to dissolve the adhesive, she explained. But we have to be careful not to damage your skin. This may take some time. What followed was 30 minutes of the most satisfying public spectacle I could have imagined. The paramedics had to work carefully to separate Harold and Jessica from the car and from each other, as in their panic they had grabbed onto one another, creating yet another bonded surface. Neighbors from nearby houses had come out to watch. Passers-by stopped and stared. Several people were not so discreetly taking videos with their phones. Harold's face was a mask of fury and humiliation. Jessica was in tears. Her expensive blouse ruined her dignity in shreds. I stood calmly by my car watching it all unfold. When one of the paramedics asked if I was with them, I smiled and said, I'm the wife, the one he's not stuck to. She didn't quite hide her smile as she turned back to her work. By the time they were finally separated from the car, Harold's custom suit was ruined and Jessica's blouse had to be partially cut away. They were loaded into the ambulance to be taken to the hospital for treatment of the chemical exposure and minor abrasions from their struggles. As the ambulance pulled away, I approached Tony, who was still examining the car with professional curiosity. Is it salvageable? I asked innocently. He shook his head. Never seen anything like this. The entire engine will need to be replaced. And even then, finding period-correct parts for a custom build like this, it's going to cost a fortune. How tragic, I said, not bothering to hide my satisfaction. As I drove home, my phone began buzzing with messages from friends and neighbors who had already heard about the incident. In a small community like ours, news travels fast, especially scandalous news involving a prominent businessman being caught with his secretary, both of them glued to his classic car, while his wife watched calmly from the sidelines. By evening, Harold's humiliation was complete, and my revenge had only just begun. The aftermath of what local gossips quickly dubbed the glue incident spread through our community like wildfire. By evening, my phone was ringing nonstop with calls from friends, neighbors, and even parents of patients wanting to know if the rumors were true. The hospital where I worked became a hotbed of whispered conversations that stopped when I walked by. But instead of the pity I'd feared, I found support. My colleagues, many of whom had known Harold for years, rallied around me. The head of surgery, who had been cheated on by his first wife, stopped me in the hallway to say simply, "Good for you, Marilyn." Harold spent 5 hours in the emergency room. The adhesive had caused chemical burns on his wrist and hand. Jessica had similar injuries, along with an allergic reaction to the solvent used to remove the adhesive. Both were treated and released, though not before a hospital administrator, who was a friend of mine, ensured they were placed in separate treatment areas. When Harold finally called, his voice was a combination of fury and disbelief. "They're saying it will cost $30,000 to rebuild the engine, if it can be rebuilt at all. Do you have any idea what you've done?" "About the same amount you spent on hotel rooms and jewelry for Jessica, I'd guess," I replied calmly. The credit card statements were quite illuminating. His threats of legal action began immediately. "I'm calling the police. I'm pressing charges. Destruction of property. Criminal mischief. My lawyer says I could sue you for everything you have." "You could try," I agreed, "but then we'd have to discuss in open court why you were with your secretary in a residential neighborhood during business hours. And we'd have to go through all our finances, including those accounts you've been hiding. Catherine says those could be considered marital assets improperly concealed during divorce proceedings." The silence on the other end told me he hadn't expected me to be so well prepared. "Catherine, my divorce attorney. You've been planning your exit strategy, Harold. I'm just making sure I have one too." That evening, Jessica made her own feelings clear. She called me in tears, something I hadn't anticipated. "He told me you were already separated," she sobbed. "He said you had an understanding, that you stayed together for appearances but lived separate lives." I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. "Harold has been lying to both of us, Jessica. The question is, what are you going to do about it?" The next morning, I learned what she'd decided. Harold called even more furious than before. Jessica quit. Just sent an email to the entire office saying she was resigning effective immediately. "Do you know how hard it is to find a good administrative assistant?" "About as hard as finding a faithful husband, I imagine," I replied before hanging up. Word of the affair reached Harold's business partners quickly. Theodore and Richard, who had been at our wedding and were godfathers to our children, called an emergency meeting. Harold's behavior, they informed him, violated the morality clause in their partnership agreement. His public scandal had already cost them a major client who'd heard about the incident from his wife, a nurse at the hospital. Harold came home that night looking defeated. "They're buying me out," he said, slumping into a kitchen chair, "at a reduced valuation because of damage to the company's reputation. I continued chopping vegetables for my dinner, a meal for one. That sounds like a problem for you and your lawyer to solve." "Marilyn, where am I supposed to go? Jessica won't take my calls. The partners are forcing me out. Everyone in town is talking." "The Residence Inn on Peachtree has monthly rates," I suggested. "I've already packed some of your things. The rest can wait until we decide how to proceed with the divorce." He looked up sharply. "Divorce, Marilyn, we need to talk about this. It was a mistake, a stupid mistake. A 2-year mistake, with an apartment and vacations and future plans. That's not a mistake, Harold. That's a choice. One you made every day for 2 years." Our children learned the truth that weekend. I hadn't planned to tell them so soon, but Harold in his desperation had called them both. His version of events predictably cast him as the victim of my irrational vengeance. To their credit, Neither James nor Emma was entirely convinced by his story. Dad says you destroyed his car because you were jealous of his secretary, Emma said when she called me. That doesn't sound like you, Mom. I took a deep breath. Your father has been having an affair with his secretary for 2 years. I found out when I saw their text messages. Very explicit text messages. He denied it, then promised to end it, then continued seeing her. The car incident happened when I discovered he was planning to take her away for our anniversary. The silence on the other end was painful. Emma, I believe you, she said finally. Dad has been weird whenever I've asked about you lately, making excuses about why you couldn't come to the phone when I called the house. I just didn't want to think. I know, sweetheart. I didn't want to think it either. James's reaction was more volatile. He drove down from Charlotte the next day and confronted his father at the Residence Inn. I don't know exactly what was said, but when James came to see me afterward, his knuckles were bruised. He's not the man I thought he was, James said simply. And in those words, I heard the death of a lifelong hero worship. The divorce proceedings began formally the following week. Harold had moved most of his remaining things out of the house, taking up semi-permanent residence at the extended stay hotel. His life was unraveling quickly. Without his business income, he was suddenly concerned about money. The Mustang, now evidence in our divorce case, sat useless in his former company's lot, a monument to both his infidelity and my revenge. Jessica, I heard through the hospital grapevine, had taken a job in Savannah 3 hours away. She deleted all her social media accounts after some of the videos of the glue incident went viral on local community pages. Harold's attempts to control the narrative failed miserably. His reputation in the community once sterling was in tatters. Men who had been his friends for decades crossed the street to avoid speaking to him. The country club quietly suggested he might want to take a break from his membership until the unpleasantness had passed. Meanwhile, my lawyer was discovering more and more financial deceptions, accounts in the Caymans, investment properties purchased under a business entity I'd never heard of. Harold had been preparing for years to leave me with as little as possible. He's going to regret that strategy, Catherine told me with grim satisfaction. Judges take a very dim view of hidden assets, very dim indeed. When Harold made one last, desperate attempt at reconciliation, showing up at the house with fun of flowers and promises of therapy and change, I was ready. It's too late, Harold, I told him, not inviting him past the front porch. Not because of the affair, though, that would have been enough. It's too late because I've seen who you really are now. The lies, the financial deception, the plans to leave me with nothing after 32 years together. I don't know that man, and I certainly don't want to be married to him. As he walked back to his rental car, shoulders slumped in defeat, I felt no satisfaction, no triumph, just a quiet certainty that I was finally moving in the right direction. Away from Harold and toward whatever came next. 1 year can change everything. As I sit in my new condo, overlooking the park surrounded by furniture, I chose myself and art that speaks to my soul. Rather than matching the decor, I barely recognized the woman I was 12 months ago. That Marilyn was broken, betrayed, angry. This Marilyn is whole again, or getting there day by day. The divorce was finalized 4 months ago, and thanks to Catherine's brilliant legal work and Harold's poorly concealed financial deceptions, the settlement was more than fair. The judge was particularly unimpressed by the Cayman accounts and the shell company Harold had created to hide assets. In the end, I received the house, which I promptly sold half of all discovered assets, significantly more than Harold had planned to part with, and a substantial portion of his business buyout. Harold tried to counter with the destruction of property claim, but mysteriously no one could prove exactly what had happened to the Mustang's engine. The mechanic's report stated only that a foreign substance resembling industrial adhesive was found in the oil system. Without definitive proof of how it got there, Harold's claims fell flat. My relationship with my children has evolved in unexpected ways. The initial shock and pain has given way to a new adult connection. We talk more openly now, about real things, not just surface-level updates. Emma confessed she'd always sensed tension between Harold and me, but hadn't wanted to acknowledge it. James admitted he'd idolized his father in ways that weren't entirely healthy and was working through that with his own therapist. Last month, they both came to visit me in my new home. We cooked dinner together, drank too much wine, and laughed until tears streamed down our faces. Not once did any of us mention Harold. He wasn't needed for our joy. I've reconnected with old friends who had fallen by the wayside during my marriage. My nursing school roommate Patricia and I now have a standing weekly lunch date. My book club, which I'd stopped attending because Harold found it boring, has welcomed me back with open arms. 6 months ago, I took my first solo trip. A week in Santa Fe at an art retreat I'd been eyeing for years. I learned to work with clay, my hands shaping something from nothing, a metaphor not lost on me. I brought home 3 imperfect but beautiful bowls that now sit proudly on my dining room table. The art classes led to others. Watercolor on Wednesdays. Life drawing, yes, with nude models, something that both terrifies and exhilarates me on Saturdays. I'm terrible at both, and that's perfectly fine. The joy is in the creating, not the result. Harold's life took a different trajectory. His business partners bought him out, but at a significantly reduced valuation due to the scandal. The custom car community, which had been his social circle for decades, largely turned its back on him after the story spread. He tried to salvage his relationship with Jessica following her to Savannah, but from what Emma heard through mutual connections, that lasted all of 3 weeks before she ended it for good. Last I heard, he was trying to start a new restoration business in Florida. At 59, with a tarnished reputation and depleted finances, it's an uphill battle. Sometimes I feel a twinge of sympathy for him. More often, I feel nothing at all. That indifference is its own victory. There's someone new in my life now, Edward, a widower who teaches American literature at the community college. We met at a charity function for the hospital and bonded over our mutual love of classic films and distaste for small talk. Our relationship is progressing slowly, thoughtfully. At our age, there's no need to rush. We've both learned the hard way that a solid foundation matters more than passion alone. What surprised me most about this past year is how I've become a touchstone for other women going through similar situations. It started with a nurse at the hospital who pulled me aside to ask how I'd found the strength to leave my marriage. Then a neighbor. Then a friend of a friend. I began hosting informal gatherings at my condo. Just coffee and conversation at first, but it evolved into something more structured. A support group of sorts, though we'd never call it that. Just women helping women navigate betrayal, divorce, and rebuilding. The lessons I've learned could fill a book. That trust, once broken, is rarely fully restored. That sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is walk away. That forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation. That forgiveness is a gift you give yourself, not the person who hurt you. I've forgiven myself for the glue incident. Not Harold, not yet, maybe never. But myself, yes. I understand now that extreme pain can drive even the most rational person to extreme actions. I'm not proud of what I did, but I'm not ashamed either. It was a desperate act in a desperate time. A line crossed that can't be uncrossed. Would I do it again? Probably not. The momentary satisfaction wasn't worth the legal complications that followed. But do I regret it? Also no. Sometimes you need to burn a bridge completely to ensure you never try to cross it again. As I look to my future, I see possibilities I couldn't have imagined a year ago. Travel, new friendships, perhaps a deeper relationship with Edward, perhaps not. The beauty is in the not knowing, in the freedom to choose without considering someone else's preferences, schedule, or limitations. At 58, I'm not old, but I'm old enough to know time is precious. Too precious to waste on regret or bitterness. Those emotions served their purpose, pushing me out of a marriage that had become a lie. But they don't serve me anymore, so I've set them free. What advice would I give to someone facing a similar betrayal? Trust your instincts. Get good legal counsel immediately. Document everything. And remember that surviving betrayal doesn't make you a victim. It makes you a warrior. Life after Harold isn't what I expected it would be. It's better. Harder in some ways, certainly. There are still nights I wake up reaching for someone who isn't there. Days when handling everything alone feels overwhelming. But the trade-off has been worth it. Freedom, self-respect, the knowledge that I am enough exactly as I am. So that's my story. From devoted wife to glue vigilante to independent woman. Not the path I would have chosen, but the one that brought me here to this place of hard-won peace. What about you? Have you ever had to rebuild your life after betrayal, or found yourself doing something you never thought you were capable of when pushed to your breaking point? Share your story in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this journey through my personal disaster and rebirth, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need to hear that there's life after heartbreak. Thank you for listening, and remember, sometimes the thing that feels like the end is really just the beginning.